Hey, Amy Hill here with Sandy Run News. I am with Matt Rucker in Sandy Run, South Carolina, and he is one of our famous authors. And I wanted to talk to him for a few minutes and introduce him to everybody, which everybody in Sandy Run already knows you, right? So
Yeah,
introduce his books.
in a good way.
Yeah, it's a definitely a good way. I wanted to talk to Matt tonight about his books. He's got one coming out, a third one coming out. The first one you did was The Life Stories of Peepaw. When did this one come out?
That came out in July 18th.
And the stories in there, you wanted to hand those down to your children and grandchildren and be able to carry on some of your life stories. Tell us a little bit about the book and what inspired you.
The book came about because of my daughter and wife, and the fact that in the ministry, very few grandchildren know their grandparents. They know a few things about them, but I wanted to give my granddaughter something that she could read later on, perhaps in life, and she'd realize my love of God, my love of people, and that I was a bit of a rascal. And it comes out in the book. But it's a gift to her, and that was the motivation in writing the book, was because of constant people telling me, write a book, write a book, write a book. And I hated writing. In the ministry, I'd have to write a newsletter article, and I hated it every month. And the secretary would always be getting on me, have you got your article? No, not yet, I'm getting on it. But I have learned to like writing more now than I did then. And so the greatest compliment that I had concerning the book was my granddaughter. When she saw it, she told her mom, she says, "Mom, I'm famous." And so that was the greatest compliment that I had. And so the life stories of Peepaw are basically stories, and I give a moral at the end of it to help her see various situations in life, and also the reader. And it was a fun book to write, and I gave her both the good and the bad sides. You know, you can't do a story of your life without having some sad, bad stories in there too. So I gave her an equal balance, and she has read it and she likes it, and that's the greatest compliment there.
Absolutely, and it was for her. And this is a picture of her on the cover too, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and it also, with your life lessons that you put into the book, you also reflect on God and how you relate your struggles and your successes back to God and give Him the glory. And
yes.
That's really a good thing to hand to her, and
yes.
I love the book. The second one, Walking My Road of Grief. This book was released when?
In July of 18.
And this touches more of the lower parts of your life.
19, I'm sorry.
19?
They all run together at my age.
I understand. Tell us a little bit about Walking My Road of Grief.
That was by far the most difficult write, because I had to relive everything concerning the suicide death of my son at 13. And I had never written poems before. And what would happen is that a couple days before the funeral, and Brandon planned all this out. He wanted me to find him because he knew I wouldn't judge him, and he knew that I would be the one that would be the prime one to find him. He also talked with me and my wife several months before, when I did the funeral of a young lady. And Brandon told me, he said, "Dad, if something happens to me, I want you to do my funeral." And I laughed at him and I said, "Son, you know, you'll see me. You know, I won't see you." And one of the first things I thought about was after finding him was I had to do his funeral. And that night, there came a dream. And the dream is kind of like, imagine sentences of phrases just going through the air. And they wake me up after midnight. And I get up and I grab a pencil and paper and I write as fast as I can, then go back to sleep. And this is the way the poems would come at significant events the following year after his death. And I wrote the poems, there was 20 of them, and some of the poems I understand, some I don't.
Right.
But I try to give what I feel is my interpretation of the poems based on what was going on. And what I did was, when I wrote the poem, I would write down what was going on: anniversary of his death, his birthday, Christmas, and I would write these down, and that was the seed for the growth of the idea of what was going on. But I wrote this book took probably 9 months to write, because I could only write so much at the time.
Right, I imagine it was difficult.
And this book has really taken off with people who have lost loved ones. They've used it as Sunday school book. They've used it as giving to a friend who has lost a loved one. And it has taken off. And I guess the thing that amazes me about both books is the fact that, they're just a book to me. Mm-hmm. I write a book and I hear all these comments, from people all over that say, this is how it touched me. And I'm humbled by the fact that I could write something that would give somebody some pleasure or comfort.
Right.
That's been the amazing thing, of the books so far.
Well, both are incredibly heartfelt and very inspiring. The first one even shows your rascalness, and you have humor in it. Both of them are great. So the third book that you have coming out, what is the title of that one going to be?
The title of the book, if you look at the face of the book, you'll see my granddaughter and myself sitting in a field of crimson clover. And the title is Field of Memories. And these are stories, again, in my life of growing up and just writing about it. But this time I give the moral to the reader, not to Alyssa, but to the reader. And there are probably 70 stories in that one. And they're stories, true things that happen. I can share one of them with you.
Sure, I would love that.
This occurred at the next to the last church that I retired from, and I had this elderly guy there, and he was kind of like the pillar of the church, a real quiet man. When he spoke, everybody listened. Well, Mr. Marion had a grandson, Jared, who was by far the smartest little fella that I have ever known. And when I did a children's sermon, I had to really listen to what Jared said, because he didn't ask you any simple question. And Mr. Marion, after church one Sunday, said, "Can you come out of the house? I need to talk to you about one of my kids." And I said, "Yeah, I'll come in the morning." He said, "Come for coffee." So we sat there and drank coffee, talked about his problem. And at the end of it, he said, "I want to share with you something about Jared." And he said, last week was 4th of July. and I raised hogs, and you know how skittish they are. And they were shooting those firecrackers, so Jared and I walked up to check on the hogs. We get up there, the hogs are fine, and we're walking back down to the house. And Jared looks at me and says, "Granddaddy, you know where fireworks go when they go up in the air?" And he says, and knowing Jared, Mr. Marin wasn't going to come out with some simple thing. He said, "No, son, I don't. Where do they go?" He said, "They go to heaven." And he said, "They go to heaven?" "Yes, sir. And when they do, the angels see them and they say, 'What in the hell was that?'" And here's a kid that's about 7 years old. He wasn't trying to be, gross or obscene. He was just expressing his feelings of what those poor angels were thinking. And it's stories like that that shape your life, because every time I see a firework demonstration, every time I see a firework sign, I think about those poor angels.
Yeah.
So that's one of the stories in there. And the others, you have funny ones. There are less sad ones in this book. They are more upbeat and funny.
Inspiration.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that is great. Now, where can they buy this? And when is the new one coming out, first of all?
We just received the corrected copy of the manuscript yesterday. And so we have to correct it, send it back in. There's a process you go through. And you send it back into them. And then they basically email you and say, "Is this what you want?" "Yes." And they don't change anything, which is really neat.
Yeah.
And we say, "Yeah, that's it." We sign something and they print the book. And they'll have it out. And the publicists, they're doing international marketing right now. What amazes you is you look at the paper they send you and says copies in India, copies in England, Australia, and you got all these countries there. And so they're beaming out to all these people. Canada is a big following.
Wow.
And but it's coming out, I would say, maybe a month. And the easiest way is to file it on the internet. I have a website that I don't know a thing about.
That's okay. We're going to publish it in the story so everybody will be able to get to it.
Yeah. But I can't get on it. I went to school as an electrical engineer and designed computers. I can tell you how one works. But now don't sit me down in front of one and say, "Get on the computer." I can't.
Yeah.
I can't do that.
I get it. I have trouble now, the older I get, and with the more new stuff that comes out, I understand. But is the publisher the Mulberry Books
Yes.
LLC? So the publisher is the Mulberry Books LLC, and we will post Matt's website and his Facebook page. And where can they get these books? Can they order them besides your website, which we'll post? They can also get them on Amazon, can't they?
On Amazon, look up my name, and it'll put you right there, and you'll see both books. And a lot of people order them on Amazon.
And I know we call him Matt here in Sandy Run, but it is listed as Matthew Rucker on Amazon, right?
Yeah, Matthew Rucker.
Yeah.
I was a chaplain in a hospital and had a patient in the psych center, and I went in there and she said, "What's your name?" And I said, "Matt," like on the floor, and then think of trucker and take the T off, Matt Rucker. She said, "I got it." Well, the next day I came back by to see her, and I asked her, I said, she said, "Don't tell me, I know your name." And I said, "Okay, what is it?" She said, "Rogue Trucker." And so that's the way they knew me in the hospital, was Rogue. And that story's in the book too.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. That is fantastic. So be looking for the third release. And get these two if you don't have them. They're great reads. I promise you'll enjoy them. And especially this one, Walking My Road of Grief. It's a good healing book that you can give to folks that are experiencing grief. But my goodness, Matt, this is great that you've got a third one coming out. Any plans for a fourth?
Fourth one is coming up, and these are stories. When I grew up, there was no TV, and so we'd go to my uncle and aunt's houses, and they'd tell stories. My uncles would, and they're just give you example of one of them, and I hadn't even written this one yet. But I had an uncle that did a lot of gardening, and he told my dad, he said, Dad was talking about putting soda to his watermelons. Huh. And Uncle Rock said, well, dude, be careful. Said, you don't want to put it to the vines before it rains. And Dad said, well, why not, Rock? And he said, well, I had some and I put soda to them, and the vines grew so fast that they drug the bottom out of the watermelons.
That is funny.
That's some fast-growing vines.
That is. They took off without their feet. Well, thank you, and thank you for letting me. One more question, and I promise I'll leave you alone.
No problem.
Tell me, is there any Sandy Run folks in there that there's going to be some really fun stories about? Do you want to give us one or two names of who's going to become famous in one of your books? Or a peek.
I think
a hint.
Yeah, I think Roger Hill.
Uh-huh.
He's in there. Sherman, who
bless his heart, yeah.
Yeah, he died not too long ago, and it was amazing that I refer to him in the Peepaw book as S-Man. It doesn't call him Sherman. Yeah. And I write about him making moonshine and going to the stills and sitting with him. And I got him a copy of my book through his nephew, and Sherman's nephew read him the book the day before he died.
Oh, good.
And Sherman said, like Alyssa did, my granddaughter, I'm famous.
He was a wonderful man. Yeah.
But they're just, my cousins are in there, Nathan, Tommy, Joe, Ralph, who I always call Lala, and I did his funeral Monday.
Oh. And
so it's just good friends, but the stories are real, and there are real people in there.
That's what makes these so unique and such a blessing.
Yeah.
It's actually a record of history for Sandy Run in a way.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Well, thank you so much for letting me in your home and bug you tonight. And again, we'll put the website and his Facebook page on the story. And anything else you want to inspire us with tonight?
All I would say is that I've enjoyed this, and you look like one of those hot announcers on TV.
The cameraman's my husband.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And he's cute as a button.
He is, isn't he? Thank you.